that Pluto is changing signs. And this is a big deal, right? It's a big deal, but it's a slow deal. So even though, yes, we are in this huge transformative cycle, we are dealing with a lot of death and transformation, death of all kinds, death of relationships, death of friendships, death of work or certain jobs, and of course the literal death that a lot of people are dealing with and coping with, and maybe even death that's happened in the last few years that you haven't had the bandwidth or space or capability to really be with that grief. So Pluto in Capricorn is changing, into Aquarius, and in this transition point, it becomes really personal, where you start to notice in your life the transformation. You start to notice in your life, even though it's an outer planet and, for parts of it, it doesn't even feel personal. It feels very out there. It feels very societal or bigger movements over time. I'm going to give you some examples of this from this last cycle, but I want to make it really clear that as this transition is happening, which isn't complete until 2024. So like I said, a lot of people are talking about Capricorn, Pluto moving out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. And yes, that's true. And at the same time, we are going to see this happening in little increments. So we are going to have this first glimpse of it from now until June 12th. So March 23rd, the ingress happens early in the morning, 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and then goes until June. And then it goes back into Capricorn. So I really want to spend some time focusing on, because there's all this hype, and yes, it's worthy of the hype, because there's all this hype, I really want to make it personal, and I really want to make it something that you can work with for this next year. Yes. We are dealing with a really slow moving outer planet, Pluto. Pluto takes about 244 years to go all the way back around to where it was, which means that it hasn't been in Capricorn for a really long time. And even though it is moving out of Capricorn, it's going to move out real slow, and it's going to retrograde back in. So even though it moves out March 23rd, at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, around that time, it's going to come back into Capricorn in June. And then it's going to stay there. And then it's going to go out, and then it's going to come back in. What does this mean for you? This means if you have anything at the last degrees of Capricorn, the beginning degrees of Aquarius, your world is getting rocked and shaken and upstirred. And there's things that you're being asked to release and let go of and transmute and transcend, and it is uncomfortable. The one thing that we can all agree about Pluto is it is uncomfortable work to work with. So if you have a strong Plutonic placement in your chart, you are going to be someone who deals with a lot of the dark underbelly. If you know someone who has a strong Plutonic placement or has a lot of Pluto energy, which Pluto rules Scorpio, so it can also be kind of that Scorpio energy, which is to say there's things happening below the surface. Someone who just generates power and magnetism. So something that we say, if you have ever read, I loved reading with my kids, The Lightning Thief, and they talk about the children of Pluto were able to bring up gems from the earth, and that's something that really stayed with me and is so Plutonic. It's we tend to either put things in a category of good and bad, right or wrong, light and dark. And Pluto's transcends all of that, right? And it's all about alchemy. It's all about transformation. And in astrology, we talk about Pluto being your pain from which you access your power. And if you're not willing to go into your pain, if you're avoiding or you're numbing or you're not able to go into the depths, you won't really get and exercise what true power is on this planet, what true power, not the artificial power, which we're seeing a lot of in our world right now. And I'm going to talk about that with Pluto and Capricorn, but the true power. And that comes from being able to go into the depths of the pain, go into the depths and the darkness and bring light to it and bring it to the surface and bring it into your awareness. And this is all the work that I do. And so if you're interested in working together, reach out. It's such amazing work because it brings you to your authentic power as a human and no artificial power, right? So Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008, and there's a lot of different movements and a lot of different things that have been happening since then. And we also know that it has been the return in the United States of the birth of this country, like the OG. And it's interesting because in the last few years, we've seen a lot of rise of like the patriot movement, or like coming back to that like love of country. And there's been a lot of issues around that for a lot of people. And there's a lot of other movements that I want to talk about. So the Occupy Wall Street movement, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, and then, of course, worldwide, we have had things, the Arab uprising, all of these things that have happened worldwide, but in the United States, particularly around those big movements that are, the thing about it being Pluto and Capricorn movements is that it's a system. And so it's not like, we think about something that has a grassroots movement. This is like a bigger system. So we actually have seen a lot of just things are now coming out, and it's going to come out more and more about like the systems that have like appeared to be about liberation or appeared to be about justice, but really having some like darkness to them. We know that during the some of these movements, there was a lot of money being moved around and a lot of money like not going to the places where it was promised to go and things like that. So with Pluto moving into Aquarius, just in this little dip in that we're going to do until June, there's going to be a lot of exposure around that. And then there's also things that will come up with Pluto in Aquarius having to do with technology and the darker underbelly around that. So for now, as we're in this transition time, you really want to look to your chart and see where these end degrees of Capricorn, beginning degrees of Aquarius are for you, because it is a slow process. Pluto only moves 1 to 3 degrees a year. And so if you have things there, then they're going to be lit up for the next year. So this is why it's so important to do this work. And I have a special happening, I think it's for the next 2 days until March 24th. It is a 30% off sale on any of my astrological sessions. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out, because it is such a great time to dive into the chart and do the deep somatic work about what this process has been like for you, what has gotten kicked up specifically in this last year, but over the last few years, and then moving forward, what possibly could be there for you to work with and have awareness around going into it, so that it doesn't surprise you as much, and that you're doing kind of the underground work to prepare for that. So the other thing that happened, obviously, with Pluto and Capricorn was that a lot of rich people got a lot richer, and a lot of people with clout or with already like, we saw a lot of like oligarchy basically, and we saw a lot of people that came from wealth building more wealth, more billionaires were made, money was moved around. And the thing about it being in Capricorn was it was a system. And so a lot of bailouts happened that were through the government, and a lot of things happened like during the COVID time period, where it was looking like it was for the people, for the system to work functioning and all these things. But in reality, there's a lot of different money and resources being moved around and a lot of consolidation of things. So one thing I will say, coming from pre-2008, of being pretty aware of what was happening politically, environmentally, different things that were being kind of held off around mergers or it's so hard to say. I can't really say a lot of things, but things that were being held off, and there was like this, what is that called? Checks and balances around things that maybe might not be good for the environment, or might not be good for the people, or might not be good for certain things. There was this more of a checks and balances. And then really it was an interesting time because I remember when Obama was elected and crying happy tears and being like, things are changing and things are getting better. And then going into that presidency with not a lot of change, and actually a lot of different consolidations and a lot of different things that happened that surprised me. And I will just say that kind of snowballed. There was less checks and balances on things. More things were being pushed through, more of a shush. And you would think with all the exposure that we have and the capability that we have around technology, that more people would be aware and more people would be doing things to create those checks and balances, or to create something that was for the people, by the people. But actually in this evolution of Pluto and Capricorn, I believe the opposite happened, where in the birth of this country was about freedom and breaking away and, creating a space for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then what happened with this Pluto return was a lot of our fears got exposed, and a lot of people were led by their fears, and a lot of trust and faith was put into the government, and a lot of people pulled out their energy of creating those checks and balances. And a lot of corporate power was created. And now, as we move into Pluto being in Aquarius, I believe that's going to be exposed. And for better or worse, I don't know what the outcome will be, but it's going to be interesting to see. We know that with Pluto moving into Aquarius, where it will be solidly from 2024 into 2040. Oh my gosh, where's that date? I didn't write that one down. 2043, I believe. We know that when that happened last time, we saw the Industrial Revolution, we saw the Age of Enlightenment, we saw a lot of revolutionary energy. I know a lot of people will watch like the Marie Antoinette movie, but if you watch that movie, that is the Pluto and Aquarius energy. Like, Let Them Eat Cake was Pluto and Capricorn, and then the kind of downfall of that and like the people rebelling was Pluto and Capricorn. So we've been in a time period where the energy and kind of corporate America and the powers that be have been in this energy of like, let them eat cake. And now as we move into Pluto and Aquarius, that is going to be the, what is to come from that. And nobody really knows what that is. And we're all kind of creating that, right, as we move forward. But one thing to know is that there is no separation from what's happening collectively to what's happening individually. And so knowing where this is taking place in your chart shows you where you're taking part in this or where you're not taking part of this, where you're supposed to pull your energy back, where you're supposed to put your energy in. So looking at your chart and knowing where these end degrees of Capricorn, beginning degrees of Aquarius are in your chart, show you where you're having a death and a rebirth, where you're having a transformational experience, where you're having to transcend some things, where you're having to leave the past in the past and move into a new future. And specifically, personally, looking at this Capricorn house for you, because Capricorn is the public authority that you have. And the public authority that you have has been undergoing massive transformation this last 20 years. And so depending on how old you are, will let you know like how much this resonates. But I definitely feel this, being born in the early 80s. So it depends how old you are. But like this Pluto and Capricorn energy had to do with your work and your public persona and what you show up in the world as. And now as it moves into Aquarius, it's really highlighting our future together and new ways of doing things and new technology and new inventions and new ways of doing work and new ways of doing your life. We saw in this last 20 years, really the degradation of these like Social Security and these different systems that the generation before, or what had been happening before, was like, you go to college, you get this job, and then you get Social Security or these benefits. And now we've seen like the degradation of that in these last 20 years. And so we really have to like recreate what it is. And so many people are at a loss or confused about what they're supposed to do with their lives or what they're supposed to do with work. And I truly and fully believe that the people that are on the cutting edge of like that creator energy, that creative energy, are really feeling this the most, because they're the ones that are building that. Like if you're feeling that, it's because you're supposed to be building something new, and it really requires this kind of like unrealistic trust and this unrealistic faith in whatever it is that you're feeling. I often talk about like pre-waving things, and this is really, if you have planets and placements in early Aquarius, you're probably going to be feeling this even more, where you're pre-waving something that the rest of us or the rest of society or the rest of the people haven't necessarily felt or experienced yet. And so it's really important to dialogue with yourself, to journal, to process, to write, to create, and to keep making things, even if you're feeling like you're not being received or you're not being seen or you're not being understood. That is the indicator that you are just a little bit ahead of the wave, a little bit ahead of the crowd, and that's okay. And even though that can feel isolating, and even though that can feel confusing, it's for a purpose, okay? So these next 3 months where we have this initiation into Pluto in Aquarius are a really important time to trust the inklings that you're getting, trust the breadcrumb trail that you're getting around your future, around different ways to invest your time, energy, resources. And it's really important to understand that this is a slower moving process. This is really a generation. When we look at generations, the babies born during this time, right, are going to be unlike the generations before. And so trusting that whatever we're creating, whatever we're working on, whatever we're working in our own personal lives to transmute and transcend, will ripple into this next generation, will be the catalyst for them to have space to do what they're here to do. And so it's really important to trust kind of what's coming through around that. As we move more into this energy with, really we're talking about November 19th, 2024 is when it solidly stays in. It's like solidly tucked into Pluto in Aquarius until 2043, I believe. Until that time, we're weebling and wobbling. And so that's why it can feel that way in our world, like coming out of what we just came through, which was a lot of like, a lot of government control, a lot of mix between kind of, it's interesting because like when we had Pluto in Sagittarius, it's like talks around church and state kind of things like that, right? And like that's definitely when Pluto comes into Aquarius. I really believe with the combination of Pluto in Aquarius with Saturn in Pisces is going to be kind of the end of a lot of different religious holds that have been happening, especially like the Church of England, different things like that. Like I feel like a lot of that is going to crumble. But now we have to talk about corporate power. We have to talk about government and corporations and separating that. And what does that look like? Is that even possible anymore? So that's the talk. That's the talk we're going to have to be having. There was something else that I wanted to say about the combination. Oh, here it is. So Pluto in Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And then we come into Pluto in Capricorn where we're getting this like back and forth energy. Like we'll have Pluto in Aquarius until June of this year. I think it's the 11th. June 11th of this year. And then Pluto will move back into Capricorn. So we aren't completely done with this cycle. And as we're having this weeble wobble, I want to be really clear that like Capricorn, the ruler of Capricorn is Saturn. And as we're moving from a Saturn ruled place into a Saturn ruled co-ruler with Uranus, that is a very interesting energy. So Saturn is necessary in our world, but we've had a very strong influence of Saturn because not only do we have Pluto in Capricorn, but we also had Saturn in Aquarius. But now Saturn's moved into like this really flowy energy in Pisces. You might be feeling that, which isn't necessarily a wonderful thing because it can lead to a lot of delusion and ungroundedness. However, now as Pluto dips its toes into Aquarius, we are going to have this breaking up, like the tower energy of Uranus with that rebuild energy of Saturn, which we probably won't get to in this go around, but expect to see a lot of like, what's happening over there? Like that's falling apart. Big announcements around things that are about the breaking away or the break up of things or that kind of thing. We will see that more in our world, and we'll see this in our personal lives too. People breaking up, people breaking away from different things that you thought they were totally aligned with, making public announcements about not, being a part of something. Those kind of things are all really at the forefront. But what I want to say in particularly about Uranian energy and the need for the balance with Saturn and Uranus is that Uranian energy breaks things up and creates the space to rebuild. And one of the best things about Aquarius energy is that it has both. It has that break up, but it also has that Saturn energy to rebuild. So it's really important to keep at the forefront of your mind kind of a delusional thing around like ignoring the facts of what you can and can't do, who you can and can't be, what society has told you can and can't be, kind of like really like changing your beliefs around that and really dreaming and really being in the energy of like, if you could do anything, if society could look however it could look, what would you want it to look like? What would you want it to feel like in today's world? Like, let go of the past. Drop the future. How do you want it to feel? How do you want it to look as we're moving forward, as we're moving into that future? But we have to be coming at it from this place of presence and this place of not fear about what we've been told we can and can't do. And if anything, these last 3 years have taught us is that fear is poison. And one of the things that Pluto does is it brings up those fears. It brings up those poisons for us to alchemize them back into our power, back into our trust. So where were you challenged specifically in these last 3 years? It's a good chance you'll be challenged until 2024. Where have you been challenged to trust? Where have you been challenged to believe? Where have you been questioning, where we're going and these kinds of things? For some of us, we've had fear around our health or germs. And for others of us, we've been challenged with believing in humanity and believing in humans to transcend that trust and transcend these fears. And so for me personally, I've been like looking at the world like, oh, wow, like this is interesting. And like, if I believe so differently than so many people that are stuck in fear, that are not wanting to do the work, that are not wanting to transcend, why am I here at this time? What is my purpose? And really what I've come to realize in especially this last year, is that I'm here to freaking enjoy the sun. I'm here to laugh. I'm here to play. And when we can come at life from that place, everything gets a lot lighter. It is not my responsibility to help others awaken or transcend or heal. It is my responsibility to myself to live a good life. And so maybe you've had some kind of awakening like that. Maybe you've had some realization about the people in your life and who you can and can't save, or who you can and can't help, who you can and can't be responsible for. I really encourage you to do this deeper process work about how far you've come in these last 3 years in particular, but really, if you're old enough, how far you've come since 2008. Like who were you in 2008? I know who I was, and I know who I am today. And I'm so proud of like how much growth and transformation I've undergone in these last 20 years, and how much more is coming with this next evolution, how exciting it really is when we can get out of fear and move into trust. So if you're just tuning in, it's been a lonely journey. I've been here alone most of the time, but I want to tell you that this will be posted on my YouTube. Maybe it'll be available on my Instagram. I don't know. But definitely, if you're curious, you can message me and I'll send you the link for the playback from the beginning. I think the title scared some people off, which I'm just like, I'm kind of done with like tiptoeing around things. Like, I'm not here to placate to people's fears. So yeah. Here we go. We're going into a big transformation. So I know you can feel it. I know that you're here because you're a part of the Change Maker Club, and we're really pre-waving a lot of these things. So trust where you're at. Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be probably clipped. Thank you for being here. And for 2 more days, I have 30% off with the promo code About to Bloom. It's in my story. And you can set up a half an hour astrological session with me, a 2-hour deep dive astrological embodiment. That's like where we go in and we do like the deep somatic work of like, okay, here's this thing in your chart, but like, where do you feel that? Like, do you feel that in your throat? Do you feel that in your belly? And then we go in, and a lot of times there's like past life things there. There's early childhood things there. And we go in and we alchemize and we do that work together, and I sit with you in that. And then I have, for those of you that have your own business and you're really kind of like, I don't know what's being asked of me here. I have a 4-hour VIP day where we like really map it all out. And that is also 30% off until the 24th. So take good care of yourselves, drink a lot of water, get a lot of sleep, and the transformation's already underway. So you're doing great work. Thank you for being here.